Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me once again for another Iron Age comic review. And today we are taking a look at Isom number 2. This is, of course, the follow-up to Eric D. July's breakout hit Isom number 1, which is the second part of the ill-advised story arc. And this is an interesting beast. I've talked about July's work on the Rippaverse 3 times. I've done 2 videos specifically about the Isom series, and 1 video where I talk about the Rippaverse pledge overall. I think the Rippaverse pledge is actually an important part of understanding the Isom phenomenon, and I'm just going to say go back and watch that video if you want an idea of why I think it's important. I don't intend to recap it here. What I see here is an attempt to finish out a story that I think is on really shaky ground. But let me go over this in my usual format. Let me start by reviewing the book without spoilers, and then I will go into the critique where I do talk spoilers. And I think we're going to have to do a fair amount of the second part there in order to really get into what I think some of the flaws in this book are. So let me start with the basic overview. Physically, it's a very nice product, just like Isom number 1. It's got a good binding. The cover feels very nice in the hand. The pages are a good quality. They have this, here's that confrontation we see on the cover between Isom, or Avery, and Shadron, which is one of his new villains. And the paper is very easy to read. Even when there's a bit of glare on that page, it's still very readable. It doesn't have that high gloss. High gloss is something I really hate in comics because it makes it hard to put a strong light on your page and then really admire that art. Unless you get the angles just right, sitting here and reading it just open in your hand is not a good experience if the pages are high gloss. But these are pretty much the perfect, I think, gloss and finish for a comic. Now there's a window there. I know there are whole lots of different levels in finishing. I work in commercial printing. I have experienced matte finishes and gloss finishes and all the different kinds of laminates and different things. This is a very, very good middle ground. And while there are probably 4 or 5 other different kinds of papers and paper weights that would be equally nice to read, I have no problem with this. We're just looking at changes in kind and not in quality. This is very high quality. I do like this, the physical fit and finish of this book a great deal. Whether it's a full bleed page, panels with a full bleed, everything is printed very well. The longer I've worked in printing, the more impressive I find this kind of thing. And I don't mean to ramble a whole lot about it. This is just what I do now, and I find it very, very fascinating. So, artistically, I did do a video where I set out 3 things that I needed to see more of in order to continue to stick with this story. 3 artistic things and 3 writing things. And I want to start by saying Cliff Richards is a very good artist. And I think he did a pretty good job delivering on 2 of those 3 things. One of those things, not so much. Gabe El-Taib is the colorist, and he does a really good job with the coloring here. I think he does a good job giving a little bit of depth, adding some shading to stuff, but in general, just making the scenes pop and read very well. Like this page here, Avery really pops out of the background, and that's partly because we have a yellow background and a red shirt, and those are nice high contrast colors. In other scenes where he is not in an emotional moment, like on this opposite page right here, we see him at a down moment, and he just sort of fades into the background. And again, that's coloring work that is done by the colorist to kind of create that depth of field in the page is very impressive. And again, the more I've worked in commercial graphics, the more I appreciate this kind of thing, and I can see it better. And there's a lot of work going into that. I know that on the social medias, Gabe is a bit of a firebrand. I don't really follow a whole lot of that, but I hear rumblings about it. What I can say for sure about Gabe is that he is a very good colorist with a sense of what he does and how it impacts the art. Cliff Richards has upped his game, I think, a bit in the expressions department. He's not a masterful actor yet, but that's okay. We are seeing development. We're seeing a broader range of expressions here. We see characters getting outmaneuvered with a little more nuance in their expression. There are some places where it's a bit off. We have these characters here. They are in a life-threatening situation, and I don't know as their expressions entirely sell that, especially this gentleman over here in the corner. But all in all, his expressions are improving. They will hopefully continue to improve. I actually don't feel like you have to go from 0 to 60 instantaneously. I do see some movement in the right direction here. Another thing I was a bit concerned about was the connections and action scenes. And what I had a problem with in the previous volume was that the paneling seemed a bit disjointed. And I wanted things to flow better from panel to panel. And in a lot of cases, what you would do is you would try and bring the timing of the panels closer together. You would give more connecting material. And Cliff has done the exact opposite. He has actually spread them out more. And that is also a possible solution. The action in here actually reads a bit better because instead of trying to show you a bunch of snapshots from a sequence of actions, we get slightly more disjointed pictures, just snapshots of different actions taking place. And this is more common in 80s comics, I think, American comics, where instead of trying to show you the entire sequence of a fight scene, they will just show you the highlights of a fight scene and leave it to your imagination to kind of fill in the blanks. And I think that's more what Cliff is going for in this. Now, there are some moments, like this one here, Avery is jumping to catch hold of a flying dragon, that are just like a sequence of snapshots in a single event. And those flow pretty well, but by and large in the action scenes, that's not as much what it feels like Cliff was going for. And it works just as well as giving a more fluid connection of actions across an action sequence. It's a difference in storytelling that is more stylistic than it is technique driven. But choosing a style that fits your artistic abilities and strengths is a good and important part of storytelling. And I think this was, all in all, a good move by Cliff. The one thing that I wanted to see some more of, and I didn't, was a little more fluidity and exaggeration. The characters seem very stiff. They look like they're posed in 3D models, and I don't have a problem with that as a guideline, but I still feel like Cliff holds pretty closely to these. And I'll show you a couple of examples from early in the story where I feel like the artwork could have benefited from a little more fluidity and a little less fidelity to what looks like something that was posed in a 3D model. Here we have a person. I don't know how well you can read that. This is admittedly not the best way to show this off, but I didn't want to make scans and do those because, well, for a bunch of reasons. But as you can see, this guy, he's kind of like stepping into a room. He's pointing a finger. He's making a power pose. And his hands just kind of look off. And you know what? If you were to be at this angle looking up at a person as they made this pose, this is actually probably what they look like. The hands are a little small because they're clenched up, except for that one finger that's pointing forward. Because of the angle he's pointing it at, it looks more like a stub than a finger. This is a place where the comic book medium gives you the opportunity to exaggerate proportions just a bit, not unnaturally, and change angles in a bit that probably isn't a natural human pose, but reads a lot better. Here in this point, instead of having like this stiff posing, you could adjust his shoulders a bit so his arm hangs looser. You could show his fist swinging closer to the camera, even though that doesn't really make any sense for a standard lens or a standard viewpoint. You could push his pointing hand into the foreground so it's more pronounced, and that finger is just really right there, giving him an air of authority and direction. As it is, it looks like he's trying to project an air of presence and power, and the parts that are supposed to be projecting are too small on the page to really sell that. And I think that's something that, again, a little bit of exaggeration, a little less fidelity to the base model that you're working from would have gone a long way. Another example, and this is from a little bit later. Let's see if I can find it. There is a point. Maybe it was in the first book. It may have been in the first book, in which case it was not. Yeah. Okay, maybe the other one I'm thinking of was in the first book, and probably in that case, not a good example of where Cliff Richards is at right now. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. So that is the kind of thing, though, that I would like to see a bit more of. I would like to see a little more of that exaggeration, a little more of using a slight change in proportions and maybe a little bit of a deviation from perspective to sell an idea, because you are telling a story. You're not just making an image when you're drawing one of these. It's not terrible. It's not terrible. In fact, it's very competent art. There's a lot of, actually a surprising amount of horseback riding in this, all things considered, and the horses look really great. Cliff Richards has the ability to show a scene and the people in it very well. He's still a little shaky on that storytelling aspect, that projection of emotion and mood on the page. I think he has potential there, but it's going to need some more building out. All in all, I think Cliff did a pretty good job upping his game for this book, and I'm sure he's going to keep drawing this for a while, and hopefully he will continue to sell the story better and better. Writing-wise, I was looking for three things. I was looking for a better understanding of Avery as a character, of Avery's abilities, and of the stakes of the story. And in this installment of the story, we get a little bit of one of those things. We definitely understand Avery better as a character, but we really are still flailing on the stakes bit. So basically, this story picks up right where Isom number 1 left off. A person on Avery's farm has gone missing. He's looking around for him. Sam, his foreman, I believe, is... I don't think that's the technical title, but that's essentially what he is. He's the foreman. And Avery's looking for him, and in the process, he's ambushed by some monsters. They burn a building down on his farm, and Isom teams up with a couple of different people to try and figure out why this was done. This is an interesting story. It comes with the problem, though. It doesn't seem tied to the events of Isom number 1 in any strong, direct fashion. What do I mean by that? In Isom number 1, we're introduced to Darren. Darren is kind of a crime boss. I've heard him called the Kingpin. I'm not exactly sure that Darren is meant to fit in any other archetype. He actually strikes me as the closest to Lex Luthor, maybe more so than Kingpin. But partly, I'm not very familiar with Kingpin. I'm more familiar with Lex Luthor. So I could just be saying, oh, well, he looks like a really smart guy with no powers who's manipulating people. And so I think, oh, Lex Luthor, because that's, the archetype of that. For me, that's the archetypical example of that kind of character. Of course, he's not an inventor, so he doesn't have that aspect to his character. But he still seems very interesting. And at the very beginning of this story, we actually get a very powerful opening where he sneaks in and ambushes Avery's sister while she's at work. And that is clearly calibrated to send a message, and it does it very effectively, and it shows him that he is capable of manipulating people because he has subverted members of Altona's staff and Lincoln. What's that last name again? Eusebio, I think is how you say it. who is the founder and owner of the Projexis group, um, he subverted people in their staff, and he uses that to sneak in. That really kind of elevates Darren from just a pimp and a crime boss, which is kind of what he looks like in Volume 1, to a very scheming and dangerous villain. And I think that there was a lot of critique of Darren as a villain after the first volume, and this makes him look a little more intimidating, and certainly a lot more capable than we saw him as in the first volume. The problem I have here is that we see Avery, who is supposed to be trying to rescue a girl named Jasmine from Darren, basically ignore that entire plot for most of this book. Now, yes, something on his farm burned down, and he's trying to figure out what that was. Does that tie back to the Darren plot any? Not in this volume. And I think that's a real weakness of this, because it feels like we got two largely disjointed stories in volumes 1 and 2. And again, I really wanted a closed, complete story to evaluate both the character of Isom and Eric July's ability as a storyteller in order to close out this story. And I don't know what the stakes are if the Darren storyline can't be closed out. Kind of have a better idea. Clearly, a threat was levied against Altona, Avery's sister, but we still don't know what the potential ramifications for anyone else are. We haven't seen Darren perpetrate any significant violent crimes. We don't know what his effect on the neighborhoods where he operates are. We don't even really know exactly what he did to Jasmine. We just know that she was at his club one night, and she doesn't want to talk to Avery when he shows up to ask her questions. That's not a lot to go on. We don't know what the stakes with Darren are. We have a slightly better idea what the stakes with the attack on the farm is, because Sam, Avery's foreman, gets kidnapped. And when he is eventually, spoilers, rescued, Sam is in a room full of dead bodies. That, at least, sets the stakes, so we know what would have happened if Avery had not rescued Sam. He probably would have wound up dead like all these other people. That's something. But the main thrust through all of this really seems to be Darren as the main villain. And we don't know what kind of danger he presents overall. Clearly, he's willing to threaten people to try and get to Avery, but that's about all we've got. And Avery kind of looks like the jerk in that situation, because he showed up and he's messed with Darren's business and his people quite a bit. And without a very strong cause, at least so far. I think that's a failure of storytelling in this story. Like, I get that there is a beef between Isom and Darren, but I don't know. The similarities between what Isom did with Darren's Club Merc in Volume 1 and what these monsters do to his farm in Volume 2 they're actually kind of similar. I hope to see that. Well, I don't know if that will get straightened out or not. It's very odd. It's a very odd bit of storytelling. As for the attack on the farm storyline, I actually think that is a better handled storyline than the rivalry between Isom and Darren right now. For starters, it has clearer stakes. We know by the end of this volume that if Sam wasn't rescued, he'd probably be dead. That's a clear set of stakes. We don't really know why this attack on the farm was perpetrated, but we do know that the monsters who did it are some kind of hostile beast from a pocket dimension that has a lot in common with Hell, and that tells us a lot about what's going on here. That kind of simple moral parallel in storytelling is a good shorthand for giving us a sense of what's going on quickly. And I think that the Hell Beasts are pretty well used in that respect. There's also a flashback to Isom's origins that give us a better sense of who he is, his strong sense of personal responsibility, why he quit being a hero. All of that information is very good as well. We see an interesting character, two interesting new characters. Good Ying, I hope that's pronounced correctly, who seems like a tech-driven hero. Perhaps he has some telemachinist powers or something like that. Maybe he's just an inventor. But he runs a private security firm with his drones, and that's pretty cool. He does a lot of search and rescue and detective work. Fascinating hero and an interesting yin to Isom's yang, for lack of a better way to put it. We also get Sydney Bloodruth. And I have to admit, in the promo materials, I thought Sydney would prove to be I thought Sydney was Jasmine revealed as an Accept, one of these superhumans that perhaps Darren had been creating in order to serve as his foot soldiers. Not the case, but she's an interesting character. She seems to have some kind of magical powers, and that's the kind of thing that could develop in interesting directions as time goes on. We don't know exactly what drives these yet. We don't know where she gets them from, or whether this was something that was thrust upon her or something she developed because she was interested in it. But she is, again, a good foil and ally for Isom in this story. So I think those characters work pretty well. They're well integrated into the exploration of the farm storyline. All in all, I just feel like that storyline, this incident on the farm, works a lot better as a narrative with a single through line to it. We are learning more about the nature of the cosmos. There are these beings from other pocket dimensions or other realms. We don't know exactly everything about that, but we get some tantalizing mysteries there. And we actually do get a little bit of a hint as to what the nature of Isom's powers are. He may actually be, and this is my own speculation, but he may be more of a Paladin type character, a character with a bit of holy blessings that keeps him alive on top of a great deal of physical training, as opposed to an Accept with your traditional kind of superpowers. But again, we don't really know that. And I think that's about all I can say before the serious spoiler talk. And I think that all in all, the delivery on who Isom is pretty good in this. I have a sense for the character now. I think he has a lot of flaws and he has a lot of good points. As a character, as his writing, his qualities are, good points, flaws, neutral things, relationships. I have a decent sense for what these are now. My biggest problem with the character is I don't know when he's winning or losing still. Again, we get a few hints about maybe where he got his powers and how they work. But there is a lot of stuff in here that just doesn't make sense. And to give you an example of that, early on, Avery goes into this security building and he runs into the Hell Beasts, which are right here. And he fights with them, and they tear open his shoulder and they burn him, and then they burn down the building. Okay, well and good. We've seen these creatures can hurt Isom, and two of them are a pretty dangerous threat for him until the end of the book, when he fights a lot of them and he survives, and he actually does pretty well, even though we see that two of them are a significant danger to him. And that's a bit of a problem, because it's not like he leveled up. I suppose he did put on a suit. The suit could be armor for him, but actually, let me double check. I don't recall any statement that the suit was heavily armored. I know that at the end of Volume 1, he said all he really wanted was for it to prevent falling damage. Yeah, there's no mention of armor here. So, even with that, his head is exposed. So you would think they could at least cut his head or set his hair on fire. And if these are supposed to be dangerous to Avery, we see him completely buried by Hell Beasts at one point in the story. And that is something that you can't just show us two of them being a threat to him and then show us a bunch of them being no threat with no explanation for what changed there. And this is one of the things that makes it hard to figure out what the stakes in a fight are. And of course, we don't know what the stakes of Avery's primary mission in the Ill-Advised arc, which is to find out what happened to Jasmine and settle his beef with Darren. We don't know what the stakes of that are either. There's a lot of failure to set believable stakes and what the outcome for failure is. And that is a pretty big deal breaker in a story. It's just not good writing, I'm afraid. It is, in fact, I would go beyond bad and say it's terrible writing. We need to know what it is about Avery that is changing through the course of this story that makes him capable of doing the things he's doing. You can't just set him up as unable to do something at one point in the story, or at least severely endangered by doing something at one point in the story, and then later in the story, he's capable of doing that thing and he's in no danger doing that thing. That undercuts stakes, it robs investment from the audience, and it really does decrease the value of the story. So I actually don't recommend this book as a purchase if you're looking for a story. There is another reason to get this book. As I said at the beginning of this video, the Rippaverse is built on a pledge between July and his audience. And July making that pledge, I think, is one of the things that brought a lot of attention to this particular independent comic book as opposed to a lot of others. That and the fact that he has an enormous audience already was, something that made people very interested in this. And what this offers is not just a story. I've talked before about how I think there is a value to storytelling as a way to provide a sheltered place to people to enjoy themselves. The entertainment, not so much as storytelling, but as community. And Isom offers a lot of that. There is a lot of mystery boxes in here. There's a lot of things to speculate on. There's a lot of things to talk about with other people. And there is an assurance from the owner that he is not going to undercut your investment in those story threads. He's going to continue to spin them out and add details to them and do his best to entertain you with them in perpetuity. And I think one of the things about American comic books specifically that readers have always enjoyed is the comic book shop experience. The ability to go into the comic shop and talk about any ongoing storyline with the people there and know that you will connect over that. And with the way he's spinning this out, with the way he's introducing all different kinds of characters to speculate on and talk about, the way he's hinting at different power sets and little pieces of world building really suggests that I think that Eric July is trying to create that experience for his readers. And if that is what you want from a comic book series, more than tightly written character development, believable stakes, clear progression of cause and effect, if what you really want is that thing that overarches a community and binds it together into something that everyone can share and talk about, if you're looking for that sheltered place to just indulge your speculative bent, your enjoyment of discussing characters, and all these other things, I think Isom might actually be right up your alley. Because, let's face it, American comics, by and large, like any other medium of art, pretty mediocre. Only 10% of everything that's made is good. And even among the best writers, not all of their stories are good. But to create something that is tied together by a singular vision, that is hard to do in the sense that you have to be consistent. But July is very consistent in creating stuff. And I think that if you're just looking to go along for a ride that you can then share about and talk about with other people, then Isom and the Rippaverse is going to be right up your alley. So, while I don't recommend picking this up if you are very invested in the story of your comic books, if you're one of those people who has been invested in American comics because it's that thing that ties you together with a group of people who geek out about something, I think Isom is actually your best bet in the independent market right now. So that's my recommendation to you on this book. I am going to get more into the spoilers now. I'm going to talk about a couple of specific things. I think I said at the beginning of this, actually, that the spoiler talk might be the biggest part of this, but I kind of changed my mind. I think as I was talking about this, I realized you can, bring up the major points without spoiling huge chunks of the story. So let me say that we're going to talk analysis now. I don't have a lot of analysis on the art, other than to say what I've already said, which was mostly done using pages from like the first 10 to 15 that don't really spoil anything. Again, I think it's really good. I especially think some of these shots with people riding horses are very nice. They're kind of cinematic. Writing-wise, there is actually a lot of good stuff in here. I think the presentation of Darren sneaking into Projexis and threatening Altana was a great bit. I like the later on the reintroduction of Yaira, where Yaira turns out to be kind of a contractor for Projexis, and she's operating out of there. Is clever in a number of ways. I like the meeting here in a very mundane setting where she's just in a power suit, not like a business power suit, not an Iron Man power suit. She talks to Lincoln. The feud between Lincoln and Darren is very interesting as well. I thought the writing of the back and forth between these two big power players is pretty creative. I'm kind of wondering if Lincoln is an accept or if he's empowered himself, because he does. Whoop, that's the wrong page. He does kind of throw himself through the windshield of his own car. That is interesting. That's one of those mystery boxes that is spun out into a very good thread. I don't think all of the things about Isom are the best, but again, I've already talked about that. We have a lot of interesting talk between Goodying and Isom as they discuss the attack on his farm. We get some fascinating monsters spoiled here, kind of foreshadowed. There are some places where I just find some decisions here mysterious. When Isom goes to see Sydney, he drives up to this fence. There's a door that says "Danger, do not enter." So he just tears it apart, and I'm starting to think that this is. I'm supposed to think Avery is a bit of a jerk, because he just makes no attempt to talk to people when he goes to see them, like talk to them peacefully. I know I would take strong offense to someone tearing my fence apart if they wanted to come and talk to me about something in a peaceable fashion. Sydney treats him with a lot of grace here, I think. She shows up and, she's willing to have... Well, she sends her animals after him. She has a dragon and a bunch of gators and birds and stuff. So maybe that's an expression of her disapproval. I think that we needed a little bit more to establish what the characters are thinking A, when Isom is doing that, and B, when Sydney greets him. Like, why did he destroy her gate? Shouldn't she be a little bit upset about that? Like, all Isom says when he goes to this gate is that Goodying has me in the middle of nowhere with coordinates, but a good truck is a good truck. which is a reference back to that he doesn't have flight, he just has a good truck, which is something he says earlier, really just on that page. And I don't know. I don't know what I'm supposed to make of this. I don't know what it's telling me about Isom's character, other than that he doesn't seem to have a lot of respect for other people's boundaries. And if that's what I'm supposed to take away from it, it's being told to me in a very effective way. I'm just not sure if this is what I'm supposed to take away from the way Avery keeps going and just breaking into other people's lives willy-nilly. It seems very high-handed, but maybe that's something I'm supposed to understand about Avery. Maybe he is a very high-handed person. I'm not sure, but this disregard of people's boundaries. Again, I have in my head a list of qualities about Avery, and that is one of what I consider to be one of his negatives. This end fight, I think the way it's illustrated is good. Again, I think Cliff is getting better at writing these action scenes. As a spoiler, here is one that I really liked. Sydney and Sam are making an escape, and they're kind of jumping down on these platforms of magic. I think that is visually sold to us very well. My problem is that this is also where Avery fights the Hell Beasts, and I just don't know what's going on here. Physically, again, I think that Cliff has gotten a lot better at selling some of these snapshot kind of action beats to us. The big thing here is I don't know what Avery's doing different as he fights these, as opposed to when he fought the two in his building, because he seemed pretty on guard in both cases. I would have liked, because clearly we're not shying away from internal monologues in this. I would have liked a little bit of an understanding of what tactics Avery is trying to employ. We see him like just using some wrestling moves, and that's fine. But there's this moment where he gets buried in Hellbeast, like literally completely buried, and then he breaks his way back out, and we don't know how he breaks his way back out. It just seems really weird that he could get overwhelmed like that and then have a power surge without some kind of second wind, some kind of epiphany, some kind of moment of rededication to his goals and his ambitions. All of these are fine moments for a character to get that sudden power surge, but to just show us a person getting buried like that and then throwing the guy off the top, I don't know. I would have liked something to tie it back to Avery and his character, or the arc he's trying to go on in this story. And I kind of feel like I don't get it. I don't get what is supposed to be changing about Avery between these moments where he's losing and he's winning. Is he changing tactics? Is he getting a second wind? Is he just is his morale improving? Again, I don't have a sense of what makes it possible for Avery to win after he has lost. And that is something I think that takes away from the character and the way he's presented to us. And it's disappointing because I see a lot of the other ingredients for a good superhero story slowly coming together over the course of this series. But at $35 a volume, I don't think I'm going to stick around for them. I don't recommend picking this up if you're interested in story, and I am primarily interested in story. So I'm going to pass on the continuation of the Isom series. I am kind of interested in how Alpha Core and Yaira are going to turn out. But beyond that, I don't think I'm going to, unless one of those two series really grabs me. I think my experiment with the Rippaverse is done for now. I think I'm going to wait maybe for a year or two and see how things look after some time has been had to sort things out, get a better sense of what's going on. hopefully bring on a really strong editorial group that can help help iron out some of these wrinkles and more clearly set the stakes for the audience. I think the general concepts of these stories are good. The archetypes that July is playing with are good. I just don't think he's selling them in a way that does them justice yet. And we'll just have to see how things play out. All in all, as I've thumbed through this again, because I did reread Volume 1 after reading Volume 2, I think I undersold how well Cliff Richards has improved the flow of his panels. Because looking at them again here in Volume 2, while there are still some rough spots, I really feel like no, Cliff has really, really upped his game in that respect, and I didn't give him enough credit. So I know this is the end, and I talked about the art at the beginning, and it's been half an hour, and I apologize for that, Cliff, but I really feel like I undersold you, and I owe it to you to go back and say, no, there has been a lot of growth, specifically in the paneling here, that I did not, I think, appreciate on the first flip through. And as I'm looking through it now and just seeing the art and not reading the text, I can see it a lot more strongly. Really, really good on you, Cliff, there. But those are my thoughts on Isom number 2. And I will be in touch. I will continue to review independent comics. I will definitely talk about Alpha Core and Yaira when I have a chance to look at them. But for now, I think this is all I have to say on the topic of Isom. So let me know what you think down in the comments below. There's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use those as you see fit. And I'll talk to you later.